Let us get down to business. President Trump says he is now going to impose 50% tariffs on a range of Canadian goods. It is set to go into effect 30 days from now. The administration says this is in response to Canada's unfair discrimination against American cars, alcohol, and dairy products. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister of Canada says the new tariffs are in direct violation of the trade agreement between the two countries and Mexico. Seth Harris joins us, former acting labor secretary under President Obama, and Dan Nathan, co-founder of Risk Reversal and a CNBC Fast Money contributor. His latest podcast is out today, and I promise it is a great one. Okay, Seth, what is going to be the broader economic impact of these tariffs, especially when Americans are already dealing with higher prices from the original tariffs, but more importantly, from the war in Iran?
It's going to make a bad situation worse. Canada is the U.S.'s second biggest trading partner. Mexico is our first biggest trading partner. And now the president has said on a range of products that we are going to pay 50% or something less than that more for Canadian goods. You know, the number, Steph, you've done a great job covering the fact that the number one issue in America right now for working families, for voters generally, is affordability. So don't listen to what Donald Trump says. Watch closely what he does. This is a public policy move that will increase prices and probably inch up inflation because we depend on Canada for important products like building materials, cement, plywood, other things that are used in building housing. The number one cost for America's families is housing, and we have a housing shortage in America. If we're going to address that housing shortage, we need to build more houses. And now that's going to be more costly because of Donald Trump's tariffs on Canada. It is bad public policy.
But is Canada, Seth, engaging in unfair trade practices in any way, the way the president says they are?
Well, what they did was to retaliate against the United States for Donald Trump's first round of tariffs against them. You know, we're not supposed to be having these kinds of trade wars with our two biggest trading partners, Mexico and Canada. We have an agreement, the USMCA, that, by the way, was negotiated by Donald Trump. So this is him critiquing his own work and finding it wanting, and now wanting to go to war with one, at least go to economic war with, or maybe literal war with one of our neighbors while he's negotiating with the other neighbor. You know, maybe this is some kind of four-dimensional chess negotiating tactic where he thinks if he beats up on Canada, he'll soften them up for the negotiations. What he's done instead is sort of stiffen the spines of the Canadians against the United States, made them angry, had Prime Minister Carney talking about partnerships with other trade partners around the world to reduce the dependence of Canada on the American economy. That's not what we need right now. We need more integration with Mexico and Canada. We need to raise living standards in Mexico and in Latin America. That will help to deal with the immigration issue, but also will result in our having better markets. And that's the goal of all of this.
No one has made Mark Carney look like this much of a badass, tough guy as Donald Trump has. I'm so naive that on Sunday, when I saw these two at the World Cup, I'm like, oh my gosh, everything must be great. Clearly, I was wrong. How do you see this playing out?
Yeah, I don't think he expected to be, challenged by a strong leader from Canada. And that's what Mark Carney has actually emerged as. And, the thing that I'm most worried about is that tariff that they're putting on hockey sticks. I mean, that seems to be something that is going to be, it just seems very performative if you think about it. And I'm joking, obviously. But when you think about, Trump went to Beijing and there was a lot of issues, but this is back in April, right? To talk about, and it was tariffs was a big one here. And when you think about, and Seth just said this, the fact that they are going about this with our largest trading partners in our own hemisphere that are our allies, and they have not gone as hard as they have with China. Now, you have to go all the way back to April 2025, and they put these big fentanyl tariffs and some other, I guess, punitive sort of ones. Mm-hmm. But, the stock market reacted to that. You remember the stock market dropped 20%, I want to say, in a matter of weeks like that. And that obviously taught taught the administration a big lesson that is very focused on the S&P 500, the largest index of stocks, 500 of them that trade here, right? And they have a lot of exposure overseas. So when you think about this round of tariffs, what that means, we have the tariff from 2025 to deal with. We have new tariffs right now. We have the inflationary pressures of the war. And when you think about, I think the administration's kind of feeling it. They got this good inflation report for June. A lot of that had to do with oil coming down because of the ceasefire.
Which is back up.
Which is going to go back up.
Okay, new topic. A judge has put a 2-week pause on the $110 billion Paramount-Warner Brothers merger over concerns that it might violate antitrust laws. Do you think that this deal could actually get blocked, or this is just temporary, gumming things up, going to delay it? I mean,
one of the most interesting things about that World Cup final is Ted Sarandos, who is the CEO of Netflix, was in the box with the Kushners and the Trumps and everything like that, and chatting up with him. Now, Ted Sarandos is the CEO, obviously, of Netflix. They were bidding for Warner Brothers. They got outbid by Paramount. Ted Sarandos went to the White House, and he came out, this is a few months ago, and said they're pulling their bid and giving it to Paramount. So the president was obviously, fairly persuasive as it relates to that. One other thing about this deal, when you talk about is it going to go through, there's what they call a ticking clause going in. If the deal is not done by September 30th, they basically have to pay shareholders of Warner another 25 cents per share. Now,
who have been paid a whole lot of money already.
That's right. So, does this, is there an opportunity for Netflix to get back in there? Maybe.
Okay, Seth, the federal government has already signed off on this deal. This was beloved by this White House. What would it take? What would it mean if the states win? What actually would things look like?
Well, you would have more competition in the entertainment market, which is what antitrust law exists to accomplish, right? The heart and soul of capitalism is competition, because that's what holds down prices and makes sure that resources go to the right places, gives everybody a fair shot to succeed. When you have consolidation like this gigantic merger of 2 of the last 5 legacy studios in Hollywood, you reduce competition, you drive down wages, you have fewer opportunities, prices go up for consumers. It's a bad thing, and that's why we have the Clayton Antitrust Act. So I don't think we should take too seriously the White House and the puppets at the Justice Department signing off on this deal, because, there's a lot of political influence involved in that. Larry Ellison, who's a part of the famous Ellison family, his dad is very close with Trump. Larry Ellison himself is very close with Trump. They lobbied Trump to support them succeeding in this deal rather than Netflix succeeding in this deal. So I'm taking the lead, frankly, of the entertainment unions in Hollywood, all of whom are against this deal because they think it's going to be fewer opportunities, fewer jobs, lower wages, less diverse content, fewer voices in our entertainment infrastructure. It'll be interesting to see what this judge does. It would take a lot of courage for this judge to stand up and say, I'm going to permanently enjoin this deal. We're going to have to see if that happens.